afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today to our very exciting announcement. My name is Dawn Oyer. I am the chair of the Senate Environment and Agriculture Committee. I'm going to be serving as today's MC, and I am very excited. I think public transportation and supporting public transportation is absolutely necessary to move our state forward on both our environmental goals, also supporting our working class families, our seniors, and our economy. So I'm really excited about today's announcement and about today's press event. And our first speaker to kick things off is General Treasurer Seth Magaziner.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you first and foremost to Chair Oyer, to Senator Coleman, and Representative Felix for introducing this legislation. A big thank you to Pat Crowley from the AFL-CIO, Jim Salenza from the Environmental Council of Rhode Island, and Priscilla De La Cruz. For those of you who don't know, a number of us are part of a group called Climate Jobs RI, which is a coalition of labor unions, environmental leaders, and elected officials working together to form plans to help Rhode Island transition to a clean economy in a way that is supportive of workers and supportive of frontline communities. As treasurer, my priority is to promote economic growth and financial stability for all Rhode Islanders. And one great way that we can do that is by passing this legislation to make RIPTA free for everybody. Free public transportation is good for the economy, it's good for employers, and it's good for workers. It will make it easier for Rhode Islanders to get to and from their workplaces, to and from their schools, to and from places where they can get workforce training. It will also help those Rhode Islanders keep more of the hard-earned income that they earn, which they can then spend back into the local economy. Free public transportation is the direction that we're headed in. A good friend of mine is running for mayor in Boston right now. She's ahead in the polls. She's running on the platform of free tea. And if Rhode Island gets ahead of this curve instead of being a step behind, then we have an opportunity to really catapult our state into building a real 21st century economy that can give all Rhode Islanders a chance to succeed. I want to note, and I think it's important to say, that affordability is important. RIPTA should be free for everybody, but affordability is also not enough. In addition to making public transportation free and accessible, we need to expand the number of routes. We need to expand the frequency and reliability of routes that will allow us to use our status as a small state to our advantage. Our small size in Rhode Island can be an advantage if we have a robust, reliable, and affordable public transportation system. Just last year, a transportation master plan was released that was very good and very ambitious and included recommendations around enhancing the number of routes and the frequency of routes. So it's not one or the other, it's all of the above, but it starts with making sure that all Rhode Islanders are able to afford transportation without having to spend a huge percentage of their hard-earned income just to get around. So I want to thank everyone who is involved in putting this legislation together. Thank you to the Climate Jobs Group. Thank you especially to Senator Coleman and Representative Felix for their leadership and their vision in introducing this legislation. I think it's an exciting future for Rhode Island, and this legislation will help get us there. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Treasurer Magaziner. And our next speaker today is the Senate prime sponsor of this legislation, Senator Megan Coleman. She represents District 15, which represents Pawtucket and North Providence.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chair Oyer, and thank you, Treasurer, for being here. My name is Megan Coleman. I represent District 15 in the State Senate, Pawtucket and North Providence. I am also a committed public transit rider. So before the pandemic, my route to work involved a ride on the R line from my home in Pawtucket, the MBT up to Boston, and then a T ride to my office. I do this for a few reasons. It's a long commute on public transit, but it's even longer in the car. Gas is expensive, my car is old, I care about the climate, traffic makes me extremely grumpy. Transit's a big part of how I live and a major feature of many of the lives of my constituents and people all over the state. And so very little could give me greater pleasure today than unveiling this plan to make RIPTA free in the state of Rhode Island, throughout the state of Rhode Island. This is an integral part of the Climate Jobs RI package, which is itself, as has been referenced, a historic collaboration between labor and environmental groups focused on social and economic justice and a rapid transition to a fossil-free economy. A few points here. Public transit is a public good. It is the glue that holds communities together. What's more, transportation-related issues make up about a third of the emissions in the Northeast. And so from both a climate perspective and a community perspective, transportation is a crucially important issue. And free transit is a crucial stepping stone towards many simultaneous and interconnected goals. Environmental and social justice, emissions reductions, a healthy and thriving local economy. Having free public transit across our state will help rid the streets of congestion. Ideally, it will give a big boost to businesses. The French city of Dunkirk experienced up to an 85% increase in ridership on bus routes after they eliminated fares in 2018. Scrapping bus fares here would be a windfall to many of the families who spend a big chunk of their income on transportation. I believe that residents should be able to move freely around the state regardless of whatever income bracket they are in. This is also an issue of racial justice. The U.S. has historically neglected public transportation systems, leaving inadequate funding aside that leaves low-income communities, communities of color, and people living with disabilities without dependable transportation. And as Treasurer Magaziner said, free RIPTA is only the first step, right? But free transit is one of the many policies that can help address racial inequality in northeastern cities and in states like ours that still have a strong legacy of segregation. And as Rhode Island continues to experience the economic effects of COVID, this is a key aspect of building back better. And I'm looking forward to the day when anyone can step on, step off, as is convenient to them. I am looking forward to the improvements in service, to the expansions into new service areas, and to making existing transit easier to use, which are all priorities of Rhode Island's newly minted Transit Master Plan. And last year, Kansas City became the first major U.S. city to make public transit free. We will be making history by doing this statewide, the first state in the country to make this bold move. Everyone in Rhode Island benefits when everyone can move around freely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Our next speaker is the prime sponsor of this legislation in the House. And please welcome Representative Leonella Felix, representing District 61 in Pawtucket.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. I am super excited to be standing here as the prime sponsor of this legislation at the House because public transportation is a significant part of the racial and social justice fight. One of the most significant barriers to equitable transportation, particularly for low-income families, is the cost. We know that low-income families and people of color use transportation at least twice as much as white families. So this legislation will ensure that everyone, low-income workers, families, seniors, individuals with disabilities, regardless of race, ethnicity, and economic status, will be able to achieve opportunities for employment and education, which we know leads to better quality of life and better health outcomes for all of our communities. It's also crucial to know that for individuals unable to obtain a driver's license, whether because of a suspension or because of their immigration status, this will also be beneficial to them. We need to support individuals and families to achieve social and economic mobility. And one way of doing this is by increasing freedom of mobility, which is what this legislation aims to do. So I am really honored to sponsor this legislation at the House, and I really look forward to working with all of my colleagues to make it a reality for all Rhode Islanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Felix. Our next speaker is Patrick Crowley, He's the Secretary Treasurer for the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and he's a founding member of Climate Jobs Rhode Island.
Thank you, Chairperson Oyer. Let me begin by thanking the hardworking members of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 618, who are the drivers for the RIPTA service and the people that service the buses. Without them and their work during this incredible pandemic, Rhode Islanders would be stuck. So really, my hat goes off to those hardworking union members that make RIPTA run every single day. I also want to thank my fellow speakers here today, especially Chairperson Oyer, Senator Coleman, Representative Felix, and Treasurer Magaziner for their leadership on this issue. Dovetailing on a lot of the comments that have already been made, free RIPTA is the intersection for a lot of the things that make Rhode Island special. It's a good union job. It's good for the economic development of this state. It's good for environmental justice. And it's good for economic development in this particular way. Being the first state in the nation to be able to talk about having a free public transportation system is one more arrow in the quiver that we need to attract businesses into this state. The more people that we come to work here, the better off this economy will be. And if we can do it in a clean, environmental, free transportation system, it's one more way that Rhode Island can lead the way. And as we look towards the federal government and how they're going to build back better, with billions of dollars coming into the state of Rhode Island, public transportation system needs to be at the forefront of that conversation. But more importantly, by taking the step on our own, by demonstrating leadership on this issue, by making RIPTA free for everyone. Free. Did I mention free RIPTA? That is a way that we can make sure that every single Rhode Islander, no matter your race, your ethnicity, your economic status, can be together using this system to get around this state. And I bet that as more people get together on RIPTA, the differences that we see in the media about where our communities are, those barriers will start to fall down. Because as people work together, and as they ride together, and as they commute together, just the conversations we can have about what the next generation of Rhode Island looks like is going to be a very different conversation. So on behalf of the labor movement, on behalf of Climate Jobs Rhode Island, we're honored to be here today speaking in support of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Our final speaker today is Jim Salenza. Jim is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Committee on Occupational Safety and Health. And thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. Public transit sits at the center of the two major crises that we're encountering today, the climate crisis and the pandemic crisis. I think I don't need to rehearse the statements about climate because it's crucial if we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. We've got to do a lot of it has got to be devoted to public transit. And in addition to that, the way that the public transit is perceived has got to be perceived as a critical mitigation factor in climate change. On the other hand, the pandemic situation makes it a little more difficult because public transit is essentially getting people together in small spaces. And the mantra for controlling the crisis from the pandemic is keep people apart. People don't go to work, they stay home. We reduce people in hotels, restaurants, any facility, theaters are closed. Keep people apart is the mantra of a non-pharmaceutical approach to the pandemic crisis. So the way what this bill does is provide a bridge between one and the other, a positive bridge, to feed people, to say there's a free ride, to say you can get on public transit for free, to some extent mitigates the hesitancy to use public transit. But second, and crucially, we're going to have to pay for this, both of it. And on the one hand, we're going to have to redesign types of vehicles we use, from airplanes to vans, to incorporate what we've learned about ventilation in the public health sector. We know now that ventilation is the crucial solution of a non-pharmaceutical type to deal with the pandemic. So right now, major bus companies in Europe and Asia are redesigning the interior of buses to incorporate the ventilation principles that have been developed to deal with the schools and the buildings. That's going to cost money. Secondly, the aspect of developing a real critical approach to this is get vaccinated. If we reduce the actual source of transmission, which is us, vaccinate as many people as you can. Once we hit a level of vaccination, the threat of transmission is reduced from its origin. That is the people walking around here today. So the two messages are the joining of climate crisis and the transmission of crisis of pandemic. There's a mutual way to solve both of them. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That does conclude our scheduled speakers, and if there are questions from the press, if you want to let me know or let us know who you want to direct the question, go ahead, Steve.
To any of the sponsors, I might have missed this. How do you intend to pay for this? Did I miss this?
You did not miss it. The bill, the actual bill is going to be released within probably the next 2 weeks. It's going to be a combination of revenues from the gas tax and the transportation revenues from the Transportation and Climate Initiative. So the idea is to phase it in.
And how much are we talking?
It's about $25 million in the 2021 budget for RIPTA of passenger fares only is about $25 million.
That's going to replace those lost fares. The rest of the RIPTA budget.
The rest of we are working on fare replacement. That is the goal here, right? The goal is to make RIPTA free, replacing the fares that would be generated from riders, and that's the responsibility of this bill. I do think it's doable. I wouldn't be sponsoring the bill if I didn't think it was doable. We are fortunate to have a huge number of community partners, as we've seen. The Treasurer's Office, a very skilled staff, and yes, I do think it's doable.
Are they going to pick
So our community partners in developing this bill, right? Part of what we look for is where revenues exist and where they could exist. That's the job of the partnership as we develop the bill itself. So you heard from the Treasurer's Office, they're clearly interested in working this through with us. As I said, the final bill will be released probably within a week or so.
gas tax and
Transportation and Climate Initiative revenues, which are part of another proposed package.
So just say a couple of things. No, I just want to. What the senator said is right, and I just want to make a few points. The first is most people don't realize a significant majority of RIPTA's budget does not come from fares. Fares are only about a quarter of the total RIPTA budget. The rest of it's federal funding and other sources, right? And even within that part that is, paid for by riders, a lot of it is paid for by the state already through programs at Rhode Island Housing, at the colleges. So when you actually whittle it down, it's a relatively small percentage of the whole actually comes from fares, right? And so, to Senator Coleman's point, the bill will be introduced in a couple weeks, but the idea is if the Transportation Climate Initiative comes into effect, which is something that we all, are advocating for, it is a tax on the sale of carbon that would raise way more than is needed to do this. So this would be just a portion of the use of the proceeds from that plan. That's one revenue source that could be used to accomplish this. And then there's also the possibility of looking at existing gas tax revenue that's right now going to places that may not need to be as much of a priority, and shifting some of that revenue toward this as well. So, look, at the end of the day, $25 million is not nothing, but it's not such a large amount in the context of the whole state budget that it's unachievable.
Respectfully, the sponsors may not have been here, but I mean, it's been introduced maybe the last 5 or 6 years. Hasn't come to fruition.
What is it called? TCI?
Transportation TCI.
I will let Chair Oyer.
That it's going to happen?
No.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so the Transportation Climate Initiative actually hasn't been introduced as legislation. It was under Governor Raimondo. It was part of a regional discussion and a regional agreement. An MOU was just entered into in December of 2020 for all of the states to start having that conversation about the Transportation Climate Initiative. That's another piece of legislation that is a priority because it's going to give us much needed resources and framework to address both the climate crisis and the economic crisis. It has not been introduced. So that legislation has not been introduced in previous years.
I have a quick question. It's a little bit ironic we're holding this here in Kennedy Plaza, given that Kennedy Plaza is right now under threat from developers who want to move everybody out of this hub. So do you have a feeling, like among the legislators here, are you opposed to that plan? Do you feel like that plan should be going on? Anybody want to speak to that?
Yeah, I don't support it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, speaking from a senator who represents Newport, I'm definitely not supportive of a plan that makes transportation harder for our public transit riders. And that's what I've seen the proposal to do. I know that my constituents who are reliant on the bus for transportation, because of the way that the system is set up existing, can take them over an hour and a half to get from Newport to government services at the Pastori Center. That's unacceptable. And to add an additional transfer downtown and a circulator, I mean, you're taking what's already a trip that's too long and extending it, by another half hour to 45 minutes. It's just, that creates a 3-hour round trip just to go to the DMV.
Right.
So.
And the other part of that question would be the fact that there are no bathrooms right now open here. Right, that place over there is locked. There's bathrooms at the mall, Public City, and at the train station. So I just want to talk to you about that in reference to making it more convenient. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, I think both of these questions get to the crux of who development is for, right, and who transportation is for. I'm also not a fan of the proposal to move this bus hub and break it up. As a bus rider myself, I can't imagine what that would add to my day, and I'm a lucky one. But that also includes amenities, that includes services, that includes care for the facilities upon which everybody depends. So the bill hasn't been introduced yet, so there's nobody formally signed on. That said, we have a very strong environmental, climate-related, transportation-related, and equity-focused group in my chamber, and I would anticipate that this has a huge amount of support. It has been discussed informally, obviously, with, I guess I would say, positive results. But the bill, having not been introduced yet, has no formal co-signers.
Neither chamber has not been introduced to the House.
Any other questions?
Is that everything? Follow up on funding. The funding calculations and what we're planning take into account current service levels or the expanded service levels under the campaign.
Current service levels right now.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.